What if religion was never meant to be a cosmic scoreboard? What if the point wasn't to win heaven or dodge hell, but to become fully, painfully, beautifully human? We've been taught to think of faith as a wager, a risk, a kind of spiritual insurance policy for what comes after death. But what if that's the wrong game entirely? In this series, we're going to take a hard look at the religious assumptions many of us inherited and ask what's underneath them. Not to tear down faith, but to dig deeper, to find meaning beneath the metaphors, the practice behind the pageantry. This isn't about proving or disproving God. It's about asking, what kind of person does your faith shape you into? And is that a life worth living, regardless of what comes next? Pascal's wager is one of those philosophical ideas that gets trotted out like a trump card in debates about belief. You've probably heard it. If God exists and you believe, you win eternal paradise. If he doesn't exist and you still believe, you've lost nothing. But if he does exist and you don't believe, eternal damnation. It sounds like a no-brainer, a cost-benefit analysis dressed up in theological clothes. It asks you to weigh infinite reward against finite risk, eternal bliss versus the minor inconvenience of belief. On paper, it's tidy, logical, even persuasive, especially to those who have been raised to see doubt as a dangerous liability. But the more you sit with it, the more the cracks begin to show. First off, it treats belief like a light switch, something you can just flip on if the stakes are high enough. But genuine belief doesn't work that way. You can't fake sincerity to an all-knowing God. If belief is a performance meant to secure a prize, it isn't belief. It's theater. More to the point, the wager assumes the ultimate purpose of religion is to win, to beat the game, to game the system. It reduces the moral and spiritual heart of faith to a kind of spiritual gambling strategy. In that view, the prayers, the rituals, the commandments, they're all just chips you slide across the table in hopes of hitting the jackpot. Eternal life as a payout. God as a cosmic slot machine. And if that's your orientation to the divine, then you're not worshiping, you're wagering. It turns religion into a transaction, not a transformation. A contract, not a covenant. Pascal's wager is less about truth than about safety. It's a hedge, a contingency plan, a fallback in case the atheists got it wrong. It treats belief like a celestial insurance policy. You pay your premiums, you go to church, you memorize the verses, you say the right things. And in return, you get eternal coverage, hell excluded. But here's the problem. That's not faith. That's fire insurance. And like most insurance policies, it only matters after the crisis. It does nothing to shape you into who you are today. Pascal asked the wrong question. He was fixated on the afterlife. What if God exists? What if there's a heaven or a hell? And his wager was a response to that anxiety, an attempt to beat the cosmic odds. But the real question, the deeper, more human question isn't what happens after we die. It's how should we live while we're here? That's the question that haunts us in the quiet moments. It's the question that shapes how we treat each other, how we use our time, how we define a life well lived. And it's the question religion should help us answer. Pascal's calculus was all about risk versus reward, infinite gain if God is real, negligible loss if he's not. But in reducing faith to a strategic bet, he left out the most important variable: how belief shapes your life right now. What he missed, what so many still miss, is that belief isn't just a mental position. It's not a checkbox on a spiritual survey. Real belief changes you. It rearranges your values, your priorities, your behavior. If it doesn't, it's not belief. It's branding. What if religion isn't about believing the right things, but becoming the right kind of person? Not do you accept this doctrine, but how do you treat the stranger, the poor, the enemy, the planet? Not did you say the sinner's prayer, but did you grow in humility, compassion, and justice? Who does that sound like? Pascal, like many today, assumed belief could be separated from behavior, that you could hedge your bets with your mouth while keeping your heart untouched. But the real wager, the one that matters, plays out in your relationships, in your decisions, in your use of power, in your ability to forgive, in the life you build, and the people it touches. Pascal was right that belief has consequences, but he got the direction wrong. The wager isn't about the next world. It's about this one. It's not about whether your soul ends up in paradise or punishment. It's about whether your life, here and now, becomes a source of healing or harm. Because if your religion doesn't make you more human, more kind, more just, then what exactly is it good for? So let's reframe the wager. Let's step outside Pascal's binary, believe or don't, win or lose, and ask a deeper question. What kind of life is worth living no matter what lies beyond it? Imagine a life built not on fear of punishment, but on love. Not on appeasing a deity, but on uplifting your neighbor. A life grounded in compassion, humility, forgiveness, and integrity. A life that bends towards justice, that listens more than it shouts, that admits it doesn't have all the answers, and treats people accordingly. A life that sees strength not in domination, but in service. That seeks truth, not certainty. That loves the vulnerable instead of scapegoating them. Now ask yourself, what's the downside to that life? Even if there's nothing after death, no judgment, no paradise, no cosmic scoreboard, you've still lived a meaningful life. You've left the world better than you found it. You've shown up with intention, with care, with courage. You will have built a legacy in the only place it truly matters, in the lives you've touched, in the justice you've pursued, in the healing you've offered. And if there is something beyond this life, if there is a reckoning, a truth beyond the veil, a presence that weighs hearts and motives, then living with compassion, honesty, and grace is probably the safer bet than checking the believer box while living like a tyrant, than parroting doctrine while poisoning the well, than preaching salvation while hoarding power and mocking the weak. The point isn't to game the system. It's to live with integrity, whether or not anyone's watching. The better bet isn't belief in a specific creed out of self-interest. It's committing to a way of being that honors your values, even if no reward is guaranteed. Because the truth is, the only faith that matters is the kind that reshapes you, that humbles you, that compels you to reach out rather than look down. Pascal was trying to minimize risk. But maybe the real risk is living your whole life afraid of hell, of being wrong, of asking hard questions, and never stepping into the deeper promise of what faith could be. Not a hedge, not a transaction, but a transformation. Here's the hard truth that often gets buried beneath the bumper stickers in Sunday sermons. If your faith is real, it will show up in how you live, not in how loudly you preach it. The point of religion is not how many verses you can quote, or how many times you go to church, or how passionately you argue online. It's whether your life actually reflects the values your faith is supposed to stand for. If your religion makes you harder with the vulnerable, more proud in your certainty, or indifferent in the suffering of others, then something has gone very wrong. Even if that religion turns out to be theologically correct, it's not worth following if it makes you cruel. Think about that. Even if the creeds are all technically true, a belief system that leaves you arrogant, dismissive, or cold isn't good news. It's spiritual poison. The faith that produces apathy instead of empathy, self-righteousness instead of humility, control instead of love. It isn't saving anyone, least of all the person who clings to it. There's a word for people who talk the talk but don't walk it. Hypocrites. If you actually read the Gospels, not just skim them for sound bites, you'll notice that hypocrisy is the one sin Jesus never let slide. He didn't rail against the pagans, the tax collectors, or even the people caught in public sin. He saved his sharpest criticism for the religious elite, those who wore faith like armor while exploiting others, those who weaponized doctrine to preserve their own power, those who tithed every herb from the garden but neglected justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Jesus called them whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, rotting within. So maybe the real test of faith isn't what you say you believe. It's whether your life makes your belief visible. The question isn't just, do you believe? It's, can anyone tell without you saying a word? Do your choices reflect love over fear? Do your values bend towards compassion, not control? Do you treat others with dignity, even, especially, when they don't look, think, or vote like you? Because if your faith requires a PR campaign to prove it's real, maybe it's not. Faith doesn't need a spotlight. It shows up in how you treat people who can't do anything for you. In the end, the credibility of your religion won't be judged by your theology. It will be judged by your character. So where does all this leave us? If Pascal got it half right, if belief matters but not for the reasons he thought, then the question we're left with isn't about the afterlife at all. It's about this life, about what kind of person you choose to be, about how you spend your time, how you treat others, how you respond to pain, to power, to beauty, to injustice. The real wager, the one that counts, isn't a gamble on what happens after you die. It's a daily decision about how you're going to live while you're still here. Are you going to live a life that centers love even when it's inconvenient? Are you going to pursue truth even when it costs you something? Are you going to grow emotionally, morally, spiritually, regardless of whether anyone's keeping score? Because here's the paradox. The people most preoccupied with getting into heaven often seem the least interested in bringing a little more heaven here. They're fixated on the next world while neglecting the suffering of this one, obsessed with orthodoxy but allergic to humility, defending doctrine while ignoring decency. But faith, real faith, isn't about hedging bets. It's about embodying values. It's about choosing to be the kind of person who makes life better for others, whether or not you're rewarded for it. You don't have to be certain to live with conviction. You don't have to have all the answers to start asking better questions. You don't need a map for the afterlife to navigate this one with integrity. Because the truth is, every day is a wager. You're betting your time, your energy, your attention. You're betting on what matters most. And every choice you make, every habit you build, every relationship you nurture, that's you laying down your chips. So here's the better wager. Live as if love matters. Live as if people are sacred. Live as if justice is worth pursuing, even when it's hard. Maybe especially when it's hard. Live as if your life is the only scripture some people will ever read. And if, in the end, there's something beyond this world, some deeper truth, some greater presence, what better way to meet it than with a life spent in love? Not because you were afraid, not because you wanted a payout, but because you believed that being fully human was reason enough. That's the wager worth taking. So, yes, Pascal was onto something. Belief does have consequences. But the wager we're making isn't just about the next world. It's about this one. It's about how we treat people, how we hold power, how we face suffering and joy and uncertainty. Because at the end of the day, none of us know what happens after death. But we do know what happens when people live without compassion. We've seen what happens when religion becomes a tool of fear instead of a path to love. So here's the better wager. Don't just believe. Become. Don't just wait for heaven. Build it a little every day, right where you are. That kind of faith leaves a legacy. That kind of life doesn't need eternal rewards to be worth it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along.